Are there
So
any habits that age people faster than necessary?
sure, and I think most people would agree with this. Sitting,
Yeah.
inactivity, you know,
Okay.
being a couch potato, watching too many Super Bowls, eating too many potato chips. Everybody does it, right? I'm there too. We're all guilty, but on a
Yep.
regular basis. And once a year, I will forgive that. Sitting is not the greatest thing for us, but there are still things that we can do to mitigate that. That
Uh,
inactivity, sitting on the couch, watching TV, watching movies all the time, not getting out and just enjoying a little bit of creation, getting some sun,
yeah.
getting some looking around at the trees, listening to the birds, just going out for a
Yeah.
cup of coffee out in the yard, garden, doing a little gardening. Heck, that is great activity
Mhm.
and exercise. I mean, that is like powerful.
Pain isn't just about one joint, one injury, or one bad day. It's your body asking for attention, and the right guidance can change everything. Welcome back to the Optimal Health Guide. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm here with Josh Vance, the Optimal Health Guide himself. Josh, how are things going today?
Really well. Thanks. How are you?
That, that's good. Doing really well. It's been a challenging week for us as a family, a few medical related things and a few family members, but we're doing really well, all things considered. So today, Josh, we're going to keep pushing forward in some of this conversation about aging. We've had a few conversations over the course of the episodes about this. We're on episode 25 today, so this is a pretty cool milestone to reach. But for anybody listening in, really what we're going to talk about is, have you ever looked at your age and thought, I shouldn't feel this old? In fact, my mother-in-law just recently, she's in her 70s and she was talking with my daughter and they said, "Well, how old do you feel, Granny?" I don't know. In my mind, I feel like I'm kind of 16, but I face all these physical limitations. And so a lot of people, maybe like her in their 40s and 50s, maybe they feel older than they expected. And maybe they kind of have that experience of, in my mind, I feel like I'm still this. But so we want to dig into some of the why. And Josh, I'd love to have you speak to that. Like, is it inevitable? Is there something else going on? And so I'm hoping today we can mine out some gold from that. Before we get to the conversation, I do want to encourage you. You're listening in. We would love to have some feedback from you. If there's some topics you would love to have us address, please go to podcast.vancept.com. Submit those questions or comments. That's all going to help us shape current episodes for you to listen in. And then I do want to encourage you, like, follow, and share these conversations in any way are being helpful. Please, hit those buttons because that all makes a huge difference for us. All right, here we go. Question number one, Josh. Why do people often feel older than their actual age?
It's an interesting question because I think, a lot of different reasons for that. Some people, I think, feel older because of changes in well, actually, like you mentioned, just their physical abilities. They're maybe 70 and things have slowed down a little bit and they can't work and I think of my dad-in-law. I can't work like I used to. I used to be able to do everything and now I'm tired by one or two, about 80 years old though. So, some of those physical limitations, certainly a pain would be an issue that would, if you wake up in pain every day or you're having pain, that's going to make you feel like you're older.
Right.
And I hear that quite a bit from people, in that whole idea of, I'm old, therefore I should have pain, which we know isn't really necessarily true. Sometimes the two are associated with certain things, but not
Hmm.
necessarily cause and effect. I think we talked about stiffness
We did. Yeah.
last episode, and certainly stiffness can kind of make us feel like we're stuck and we're getting older and slowing down. But I think some other really important ones are disease that prematurely age us and affect our abilities, particularly chronic diseases.
Hmm.
And you can kind of see it physically on people. They don't look their age. They look like they're considerably older than
Yeah.
what they maybe really are. I think another thing is that reduced activity. They can't do, or they choose, they're tired. They can't do as much. They don't feel like they can do what they used to be able to do. So, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of different reasons that I think people feel older than they really are.
Yeah.
But those are kind of the things on the top of my head.
Give us a few of the chronic diseases that come to mind. I'm really interested too, because you talked about they're aging people and you can tell they're aged even more than their natural birth.
Well, some of could be like the whole cancer. All right. People with cancer, if they're having a lot of chemo, radiation, all the toxic stuff, that's gonna just pound on the body. It's very toxic to the body. Obviously, you're battling that terrible disease, but I've noticed that that tends to prematurely age people. I think there's different kinds of arthritis, but rheumatoid arthritis, that's an autoimmune disease. I think that has kind of prematurely ages people in their joints, in their ability, in their level of pain. Just they can't do what they used to. It kind of really has it takes a big toll on them. And I also think cardiovascular disease, there's a whole continuum of that. But as people have cardiovascular disease, it progresses, and maybe we have to have stents put in, and maybe we have a heart attack, and maybe we have to have a bypass, and they have a coronary artery bypass graft. That just kind of takes an age. It takes some years off.
Yeah.
They're not as spry. They don't look as young as they might be.
Yeah. Yeah. You're reminding me of those images that probably most of us have seen where you see a presidential candidate enter the presidency and then they exit, and the two pictures on either ends, there's usually a drastic difference. And so, yeah, that chronic disease that you're talking about, I can see where that does have an effect on people and it does age them externally differently. So that's helpful perspective. What about this idea? Is feeling old actually a medical condition, or how would you categorize it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a medical condition. We all age, and there are many factors that affect aging, both factors for the positive and factors for the negative. So things that make us feel younger than we look, and maybe things that, well, definitely things that make us feel older than we
Yeah.
look. But like I had mentioned, those chronic diseases, they tend to age us faster.
Mhm.
Diabetes would be another one.
Mhm.
Obesity, those two things also, they can have profound impact, especially as diabetes can affect multiple different organ systems and things like that if it's not well managed and controlled. And obesity, it takes a toll on the joints, it takes a toll on the cardiovascular system, can lead to diabetes, all those different things. We get short of breath, can't, we're having to have maybe oxygen at night because we have some lung issues because we're so heavy. All these different things, they
Yeah.
just aren't going to help us feel young.
Yeah.
And so we tend to be feeling less able to do our normal activities or the things that maybe we used to do. And that could be work, it could be recreational things, but
Yeah.
there's just a lot of different changes in our ability. And that can also go into function. Our how long we can walk, or whether or not we can make it through Costco, or we need a cart
Yeah.
or Walmart or wherever you shop.
Yeah.
Mobility also, that lack of or the good ability to have mobility, depending on kind of where we're at in that aging process and how we feel. Certainly strength as we age, we're going to have changes in strength. That's a normal physiological effect, but there's things that can be done to impact that and slow it down and maintain good strength. But the point being, that is another factor that can help make us feel more aged or less aged depending
Yeah.
on what we've got with the strength.
Yeah. Let's push further into that strength side of things. And so, what role does strength play in, if you will, the phrase like feeling young?
Well, okay, so, when we've got good strength, we're going to have better capability to do a lot of things. And that could be walking, that could be exercise, that could be our tolerance to whatever our work is or our recreational activities are. Yeah, if someone that does have really good strength, maybe they're going to be a frequent walker or maybe even a jogger, depending on kind of what age group we're
Mhm.
talking about. Maybe they go to the gym a lot, maybe they don't. It doesn't really matter, but that strength gives them that ability to move and live life. And part of strength, I mean, there's two kinds of strength. There's kind of the aerobic capacity, more the endurance, and there's also
Mhm.
that power, ability
Yeah.
to do something once. Well, power isn't, for most of us in function, the most important aspect. We need a little bit of both, but we also have to have that endurance to be able to do what we're wanting to do. Maybe we want
Mhm.
to go on a long hike with the family up to Yosemite or wherever, and we've got to have that ability. Some of it is strength, some of it is aerobic capacity, some of it is
I see.
mobility, but there's a lot of different parts that work together. But if we don't have the strength, man, we're going to be exhausted. We're
Yeah.
probably, we might we'll be super sore when we get up the next day,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. Let me throw this at you. I'd like to get a response from you on how this measures up with the way that you would kind of view reality. It seems like let's say we wake up stiff to follow up with what we go and do something more than what we typically do. We wake up stiff the next day. What we do with how we think about that stiffness determines so much. If I think, oh, I overdid it, I should not do that again, I'm agreeing in the wrong direction. Or if I think, oh, wow, I really feel that today. And let's say you stretch and you do a couple things to recover, but I'm so grateful that I did it. That's agreeing in a very different direction. It does seem like there's like a conceptual part of aging that does have to do with how we respond to what we're doing. So give me some thoughts on how that seems to come across to you.
You're spot on that. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, you can have that, I walked half dome, walked a half dome. First time I've ever done it. I've never done it, but, hypothetically, we do that, and the next day, oh my gosh, all my muscles are dying and I'm
Yeah.
so sore. And I could say, oh, I shouldn't have done it and
Yeah.
kind of go in that negative. Well, actually, that's not the best way to respond. You really
Yeah.
should. Okay. Yeah. We're sore. It's not, it's a normal
Yeah.
physiological effect of what I just did. What do
Hmm.
we do with it? Okay, we stretch, we keep moving, we keep exercising, we keep doing that. We work through a little of that soreness. We drink some water to help get that. I mean, that
There you
soreness in the
go.
muscles, that's lactic acid. That's a normal
Hmm.
metabolic byproduct of that activity. And so we accept that. Yeah, we might grouse and groan about it a little bit,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's an okay thing. And then we
It
keep
is. Yeah.
doing, we keep moving, we keep going. We don't just like, I did too much, therefore I'm going to stop. That's
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
right, because that just actually is going to kind of slow down the recovery
Yeah.
process, I would say. But that's not the right response. We don't want to stop. We want to keep going. We're going to move through that. It will get better with time. We just got to keep doing things.
Yeah. Well, again, just to layer one other thing in there, I think your position, especially with the name of Optimal Health Guide, what I keep coming back to is you bring hope into a scenario. That's what I think your voice keeps doing. And so if you had, again, stiffness, and what do I agree with? Oh, I'm never going to do that again, or I need to do these things. I think I'm just seeing more clearly your role as an encourager, as a source of hope. And I mean, in a way, it's almost like we need each of us need a little Josh voice at every one of those junctures to just help us keep going and to overcome the next thing that's coming along the way. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Josh. So we've talked about strength. Now let's layer another topic that you bring up often, movement. You kind of, in some ways, have brought it up because of the hiking or the walking or the jogging. But how does movement influence aging?
Okay. Well, several different things. Our bodies adapt to, and I think we mentioned this, but they adapt to the stresses we place on them. And that's strength, but it's also flexibility, and movement, joints. Okay. So, bad postures, and we've talked about this, they're going to lead to restricted joints and tight muscles. And so,
Mm.
that negative component, because we're in a bad posture, we're stuck there all day long, we're not doing anything to get out of that. Okay, that's going to affect our kind of aging. We're going to end up being more of that bent over, tight person. That when we're walking, we're not standing up tall. Your spouse may say, "Hey, stand up straight," and you're saying,
Yeah.
I am," but you're not because you're tight everywhere.
Yeah.
So, that's a big deal. Stiffness from the tight joints, be it the hip, the shoulders,
Hmm.
whatever, and muscles, that's all part of it. Again, they adapt. But on the other hand, when we are doing activity, and that could be simple stretches, we maintain the flexibility, we
Hmm.
move our joints,
Yeah.
and we are then able to maintain a better posture, which has huge impacts on the rest of our skeleton and on pain and on our ability to function and get into, just, I think it was last week, we had somebody in our house and we had a leak, which caused some issues. And it was in the ceiling, and we had drywall that got all bad and came down. They had to cut it out and all. So we were talking to the individual, and they were looking. Well, they couldn't actually look up all the way. They had to kind of hold on to the doorway and kind of lean back through
Yeah.
their low back because they didn't have enough mobility in their neck and upper back. Okay,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. So we gotta have that
Yeah.
structure to be able to be upright, as well as the flexibility and that movement. They look like they're super duper old,
Yeah.
whereas if they had that movement, they would feel a lot younger. They'd be able to move
You're
more
totally right. Yeah.
actively. So, it's going to affect all our activities, be it looking up, getting in and out of the car, walking, getting up from the floor, sitting on the floor, just,
Yeah.
all those different things.
That's really helpful. Okay, you're going to step on a few toes potentially here, but are there any habits that age people faster than necessary?
Sure. And I think most people would agree with this. Sitting,
Yeah.
inactivity, you know,
Okay.
being a couch potato, watching too many Super Bowls, eating too many potato chips. I
Yeah.
know everybody does it, right? I'm there too. We're all guilty, but on a
Yep.
regular basis. And once a year, I will forgive that. But when we do that on a regular basis, sitting is not the greatest thing for us. Yeah, we work, but we got to work, but there are still things that we can do to mitigate that. Okay. But
Uh-huh.
that inactivity, sitting on the couch, watching TV, watching movies all the time, not getting out and just enjoying a little bit of creation, getting some sun,
Yeah.
getting some, looking around at the trees, listening to the birds, just going out for a
Yeah.
cup of coffee out in the yard, garden, doing a little gardening. Heck, that is great activity
Mhm.
and exercise. I mean, that is like powerful.
Yeah.
So from the garden, we go to the nutrition. All right. Poor nutrition. That's going to kill you quicker than probably inactivity.
Yeah.
Honestly, in my opinion, I don't necessarily have the research to back that up, but nutrition is going
Yep.
to age us. If we eat a crummy diet full of, junk,
Yeah.
and different people would disagree maybe with me on what I would call junk.
Sure.
Fine, but most people would agree, diet is going to have an impact because it's going to
Yeah.
affect your cardiovascular system, which can lead to diabetes, which can lead to this, 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 this. So it's just kind of that whole
Yeah.
snowball.
Yeah.
Uh, Other habits, those diseases. I mean, that's not so much a habit, but the habits can lead to diseases.
Mm.
Okay, so we talked about the whole cardiovascular.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call rheumatoid arthritis a habit or cancer a habit, but toxic effects of those kinds of treatments certainly are going to age people. Poor sleep,
Yeah.
if we aren't sleeping, we aren't resting, we aren't able to
Yeah.
fight, disease before we have it. Those free radicals that are in our body that age our cells. And then, kind of going back to the sitting and inactivity, the lack of exercise, it's the same thing, right? So, we got to be moving. Those I think are some of the biggest things that are going to cause someone to age faster than what is really necessary.
That's good. Let me circle back to this poor sleep. Do you have any recommendations on amount of sleep that
Some of
somebody
that,
should have? Or
yeah,
even like time of to go to bed or anything like that?
some of that depends on age. Younger folks, they need more. Most people need 8 hours, 9 hours. I would say there's a lot of people that function pretty well with less than that, but I think studies and things show that we probably need between 7 to 9 hours for most people. I do well with 7 most nights. My wife does not. She needs 8 or
Yeah.
9. Okay. My kids seem to need at least that, maybe even a little
Yeah.
bit more. And they're, early 20s, late teens. So, when they're younger, they probably need closer to 10 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
It depends on what's happening physiologically. When we're growing, we tend to need more sleep. Okay. Um, so, I think we all need it. Certainly, our circadian rhythms have an impact and light during different times
Yeah.
of the year
Yep.
and different geographical areas. I have a friend of the practice in Alaska, and this time of the year, man, it's sunny all the time, but in
Yes.
the winter, it is dark all the time.
Yep.
So, they have to supplement with extra lighting and different things like that just to kind of keep things more regular.
Yeah.
I think we all do better with, regular rest, going to bed at similar times.
Yeah.
When we kind of get out of that habit, it kind of messes with things. We don't feel so good. I get cranky anyway. I don't know about
Yeah.
most of the rest of the population, but I get a little cranky if I'm short of sleep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, that's all real important to make sure that we do kinda get our regular, and I think in the morning, it's real important just to go outside for a few minutes, 10 minutes, take a short walk, get some sunlight, get that there's some research that shows that that's really, really helpful for mood as well as just overall well-being.
That's good. That's great. Well, let's say you're working with someone who feels old. What gives you hope when you're working with somebody that would categorize themselves that way?
Okay, things that give me hope is changes in their mobility, changes in their function. Hey, I can do this. In fact, I have a person right now, their biggest complaint was I think they fell on the golf course and they couldn't get back up. They love
Mhm.
golfing. They go 4 or 5 times a week, but they could not get back up. They had to have someone pull them up and they're like, "Whoa, when did this
Yeah.
happen? I can't do this." And of course, there's some balance issues with this too, but some of it is just plain old strength. It's weakness. So those improvements, well, they can get up now from the floor. We just did it
Good.
yesterday, and they're like, "Wow." Now they aren't 100% yet because I kind
Yeah.
of had to kind of hold on to them a little. I didn't have to help them, but I had to kind of hold on to it for safety. But we're getting there, so I'm encouraged with that, and certainly they're encouraged. So that improvement in function and mobility, and of course, also they feel better. Man, when somebody feels better,
Yeah.
and they're living more of their desired life, that's a great outcome. When
Yeah.
they're getting stronger, they can do this now and they couldn't. They can
Yeah.
stand up from a chair and they couldn't. They had to push with their arms to get out of a chair. That's awesome. And that's going to make them feel so much more younger and more spry because man, they can get up. If there's something that they need to get up with quickly, they can just get up and move. Also, just that improved outlook, optimism about their own life
True. Yeah. Yep.
when they're feeling good, man, life is better. When we feel
Yep.
terrible, life is the drag of the universe.
Uh-huh.
It's just terrible. Everything's gray and black, and
Uh-huh.
yet when things are good, we have this much more hopeful attitude to life and can kind of deal with the challenges of life easier.
Yeah.
So lifestyle changes, when someone changes their diet and they're doing well
Yeah.
with that and they're
Yeah.
eating better and just that alone makes them feel better and they're walking more or exercising more, whatever maybe it's swimming or doing tai
Yeah.
chi or stretching. They're stretching on a regular basis 3 times a week and they're taking that responsibility for their own wellness and man, that just makes my day because I
Yeah.
just feel like, hey, they are going to be doing fantastic. They're getting some goals done, and I am hopeful, and they're gonna do well. They're not
Mm.
gonna feel as old. They're moving towards what they're shooting for.
That's great. And it seems like so many of the milestones or markers that you're celebrating there, they're long-term results, not short-term fixes. Like I was thinking about that specifically when you're talking nutrition. You don't always immediately recognize that, but after a while, you're like, "Hey, I feel way better." And so that is another challenge I think we face in our culture today. That so many times we're looking for quick fixes
Yeah, and
versus
when you're
putting in the
talking
work.
about kinda long term, I think people have different ideas of what long term is, but
Okay.
from a physiology perspective, 6 weeks, there's so many things that happen,
Hmm.
changes in strength, changes in nutrition that have an impact on our cells, things healing, fractures healing. Not talking about pathology that slows things down, but just in normal tissue healing and stuff. Ligaments heal, sprains, strains heal, although there's so much that happens in about 6 weeks. So,
Yeah.
that's, I would call that more of that short to intermediate term. But that
Sure.
long term, 2, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road,
Yeah.
definitely.
That's good. All right. This feels like a daunting question if I were had this thrown at me, but I'm curious to see how you handle this. What does healthy aging actually look like?
From my perspective, I think there's a lot of different aspects of it. I think one is maintaining normal function, optimal function that they're wanting. They're not stuck not being able to go to the mountains because their balance is crummy or because they have to be in a wheelchair because their legs are too weak. Okay, they're able to maintain their independence. They're independently living where they want to be and doing the things they want to be. So their activities, they're able to participate in recreational activities and social clubs. As we age, especially when people retire, maybe they don't have as many people that they're interacting with on a daily basis. I
Yeah.
mean, I have plenty of people on a daily basis. But, with some people that stop when a person, quote unquote, retires,
Yeah.
some of that activity stops. And now I see people that are lonely, man. They want somebody to talk to,
Yeah.
and they're happy to just talk and have you listen.
Mhm.
Okay. But again, healthy aging is being able to be in those social clubs, be whatever club that may be,
Sure.
but being able to participate actively in it and not have to slow down
Yeah.
because of inability to do whatever that requires you to be able to. So that ability to be resilient, they're able to kind of bounce back from little issues that may happen because as we age, things come up for sure. We may have, I mean, one of the most common things I see when it comes to falls is the dog. Tripped over dog, dog
Yes.
leash, whatever. The dog ran over me, and then I fall and I get hurt.
Yeah.
Be it, I sprain an ankle or break something. Okay, healthy aging is being able to get back from that and go back to doing our activity.
Yeah.
I think it's also kind of just being optimistic and happy. We're happy where we're at in life. Things are good.
Yeah.
Sure, we have bumps, we have hills and valleys, but, we're doing well and we're continuing to do well and living
That's
life
great.
fullest.
That's good. And it feels like you're laying out optimal aging. We talk about, optimal health, but there's this optimal aging where you're doing the things that you want to do, enjoying life, recovering, dealing with the normal ups and downs. But I think that's a beautiful picture there. Well, last one for you. And oftentimes we go this direction at the very end. Let's say that someone feels older than they should. What would you recommend as the first step?
I think the first step I would say is just take a step back, analyze what's going on and what may be some of the causes. Come and get a little help. Let's look and see what some of those causes might be. Maybe it is some restrictions in strength, mobility, function, joints, muscle tightness, pain, whatever. But then get moving. That could be something as simple as just walking around the kitchen island or walking around the yard or maybe
Yeah.
going on down the neighbor's house or it depends on where a person's at, but just start moving. Doing something is always better than doing nothing. And then
Yeah.
begin building some strength. There's so many
Mm.
simple things that we can do. We can just stand up and sit down 10 times, and as we get aged, as we are aging, that can be quite a bit more difficult. So
Yeah.
that can be a simple exercise just to start getting some quad and glute strength. And then be consistent. Be doing
Yeah.
something, be consistent at it,
Yeah.
and keep persisting. Don't give up.
That's good. And I'm thinking too about, earlier you had talked about how we can trend toward loneliness or isolation. And I'm thinking, man, an antidote to exactly what you're talking about, the consistency is partnership, relationship, having somebody else to do those things with. So thanks a whole
Yeah.
bunch, Josh, for speaking hope into this scenario. So if there's any of you who are listening and feel like you maybe fit in any of the categories we've brought up today, you may not be able to stop aging, but you can influence how you move into, let's say, optimal aging. If you want to learn more, you can find us at vancept.com. Again, if you want to submit any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Podcast.vancept.com. Thanks for listening today.